Welcome to the last part of this tutorial. Let us begin modeling this part, which is one of my favorite parts. We have one detail here with a nice little tilt for the input, and also we have 3 cable inputs right on top of the mesh on the curve. So the question is how to model these details and put them on top of the surface on the right place. As usual, I have my base mesh here, and to make the geometry ready to work with, I apply some adjustments and some tweaking on the edge flow, on the topology, because I need the topology to be in line with the angle that I'm going to add. I can actually adjust these bottom vertices here, but I just let it slide for another time. And now, in this part, I will want to bring an angle here and just place it. Let me change to default and then place it here and make sure that it has 8 sides, and just adjust a little bit so you see that the vertices are in line with the topology of our mesh here. And to make them even in line better, I can just continue adjusting a little bit so that they match with each other. Now, if I just start to cut the places here, you notice we still have a set of vertices that are floating, right? And if we put Swift loop after that, we will get into many problems. See how we can easily just put edge loops on top of here so that we can easily and fast pick up our target weld tool and just connect those edges to the right places. But that way, if we do not do this in the first place, we will get into some problems. So now easily and quickly I connect the vertices there, and now let us start to adjust them a little bit. The reason I'm adjusting the vertices like this is because I want to get an inset from this. You see how it suddenly gets distorted, the edge that we have on the left? So that means we have to put a considerable amount of distance before we want to get an inset from this, like this. Let me check if we have anything that hasn't been welded together correctly, and seems nice. So I apply it, and it's time for applying another extrusion, but now I will use the bevel tool because it gives us both the properties of inset and extrusion, like this. I think it's good. So again, I will want to have an inset and continue giving this definition, and then, well, and then I will want to keep adjusting, and now just bring the faces. Let me put this to local, and I want to just push it like this and tilt it so that we get what we had in the reference. But let me But let me first add an extrusion because this allows us to limit the curvature and the tilt, not to get distorted and all. So just like this. And now you see it is much better in terms of the looks and the adjustments. Now I want to just push these vertices, closer to the upper edge. So now let us observe if we've got this right. It seems like we've extruded it too much, so I undo and bring it down. Let me put these on even heights with local mode, like this, with scaling. Now, just like before, I tilt around this. Let me just delete the edge that we have right here, so we freely tilt this as we want. I adjust it a little bit, tweak it till it's resembling what we plan to do. Oops. And I'd want to add another extrude so we can tilt it even more in this way. And to finish this off, I'm going to do one or two more things. For example, delete this edge so it gets a nice shading effect like that. And also I'm going to get an inset and extrusion so that it has a depth. Let me just select this and extrude it down. Now I think it's good. I'll turn on the turbo smooth, and as you can see, we have created our detail correctly. But don't worry if you see all the softness, because we haven't done actually the sharpening here. Everywhere we can add the edge loops that we now know and make this look what it exactly should look like. I believe I just forgot to create a brand new edit poly to make these separately, but just you can do that whenever you want, and I highly suggest you do that. So let's just move on for now onto this part. We want to add the three details, the three bumps, the three cable plugs. So let me delete this unnecessary edge loop. And we want to place them on top of this curved surfaces, as you can see here. So now let us begin adding our edge loops here. Let me undo this for now. Let me just bring this there. We want something like in square to work with, and we should be sure not to place our Engon on top of the main edges that are surrounding the mesh by default, because if we just place our Engons and change those vertices and edges on top of the mesh, we'll get into problems, all the shading effects and such. So the reason why we now added more edge loops to work with here is exactly like that. We could just begin putting our n-gon on top of the vertices, on top of the original mesh, but we added more geometry to evade the problems. Now I just select the vertices and connect each other to get the n-gon we want using the chamfer effect. Like this. This is good, and as you can see, it's not interfering with the main edge, but now it's time to delete the unnecessary parts that we have. So let me delete these unnecessary edges. And now I will want to remove and not control remove. Why? Because control remove also deletes your vertices that you haven't and makes this a square. So we use the regular remove command tool. Just hit remove, and up until now I always told that we shouldn't have any floating vertices in our mesh, but in this case, in this scenario, we actually do not need to connect them anywhere. And I just delete other edges, and this will be good, and it will do the job. And just to test, let me, for example, extrude, or first get an inset from this. Oops, seems like a part of our mesh just got dissolved by its own, so I just manually connect these two together before we continue adjusting the model. So now I select the face just as before, but this time I inset instead of extrude, and then extrude to downside. And then you can see we have our turbo smooth and detail, and you see how well it's performing. So now for this case, I'll be changing a little bit. Let me just bump it up instead of going down, and now inset to the inside, and now extrude it downwards to make it a hole, and obviously delete the interface. And of course we can add these edges with the Swift loop, and you can see it's acting and behaving just as we want. But now we have to actually clone this detail that we made and put them across other surfaces. One point here is you remember, we have to add some other edge loops on the base mesh's corners, but these edges will get into some problems. Although we will be dealing with them later. Now let me just copy. Oops. I want this to be a separate object so we can work this independently. Now I want to just rotate and snap. I'm now trying to align and snap my detail here on top of the surface like there, and then rotate manually. I'm doing this manually and tweaking all by hand because our surface is not fully a circular shape for us to use anchor point and rotate in relation to that. It has some kind of a wobbling, it has imperfections, so we should use snap tool like this, tweak, and for example start to move the vertices and rotate until it's sitting right on top of the surface that we want. After we finish tweaking and adjusting everything, I select the face that is sitting right underneath our model. Select it and just remove this so we can just snap the vertices to the other parts, and also these two vertices. I can now just proceed and attach the detail instead of the original mesh. And as you can see, we have some kind of a problem. You saw the vertex that was floating. I now connect this vertex to that and extend our vertex over here to the other edge. The first step to be done is to actually test if we have some vertices that are still floating, the vertices that need to be welded, and as you can see, it's better for us to select them one by one and try make sure that everything is in line, everything is connected, just like this, and turn on turbo smooth, and you see everything is welded together and we have what we want. So now you remember I told you that we might run into problems when we want to add edges to the corners. Look here, on this side there's no problem at all adding the edge loop, but here, because we have edges and vertices all over the place, we can't just go and proceed doing this normally. So there's another technique to achieve what we want, and that is to select the edges one by one and make sure everything is selected. And then, just in this case, I'll add another edit poly and hit chamfer. And as you can see, it exactly gives the thing that we want. It brings the edges with it automatically without the need to manually tweak anything. And as you can see, we have a sharp edge in the corners. Now, and this is how to easily add details on top of a curved surface. Now the other example, let me show you, is this sphere. You see the detail we have and the adjustments we have on the sphere. The first thing is that this sphere, a little bit off of the angle, it's a little bit rotated. To get around this situation, there's an easy way, and it's that we can just make a copy of it, or better say make an instance. Make sure to set it to instance because we want them to be linked together and we want to get around the tilt and rotation that it has. I snap it to this reference rectangle for it to be flat and straight according to world coordinations. You see, this has the flat straight surface and not anymore the tilt that might make the process a little bit harder. Now, we have this in the way we want. First step to modeling this example is to add some more geometry on the flat surface. We need it to be having polygons and edges, obviously, to be able to work with and change and adjust everything. And I go and pick up, let me find the cut tool and connect these vertices manually to each other. So just like this. Now you see how our model has turned into 4 significant sides. For this example, I'm going to delete 3 of them and use symmetry, not in regular matter, but first I will apply symmetry in an angle of 45 degrees instead of 90 degrees. And for the second one, I go in the 90 degrees. And then in the third symmetry, I use 180 degree. So now we have 8 parts to work with. And if I only work in one single side in the 8 sides that we have, it will automatically clone and duplicate to the other sides. So now I come back into Edit Poly, and with double click I use chamfer to make another edge. Just like this, and I will just use extrude down to make this detail, and then let us delete the extra faces. And now with Grow tool, I select these parts and just extrude them down as we want. And now in the edge mode, I just delete these 2 edges and double click on the rest of them, and well, I delete the geometry in between. And now let us go and put some edges here. Let's decide where we want to put our details there by putting our n-gon like this. I think it's pretty good in this scale. And now to make up the geometry for the vertices that we have, I put some edge loops and remove those which we do not want, and also we can now cut the geometry and put them into place. Now that I think about it, I can redo and enlarge the reference n-gon. It won't cause any problems now that I think about it, and just again make our edge loop here, and with cut command, let me find it. And now I'll cut the geometry on top of the mesh. Let me be careful put where I put the edges and adjust. So I think it's good. And also now I can just delete the reference and gone as I just did, and I now will select all of the faces that I want and just extrude them up like this, and a little bit of adjustment for this. And remember to always delete these extra faces that we have. And now let us put in there some edges. For example, one there. Let's observe from the above. Let me just quickly add one other edge loop here. I want to just add another detail like the one we did a couple of seconds before. I'm just now figuring where to add some edge loops and apply some minor adjustments till we get the geometry. I add one here, and then I will take this vertex and bring this down a little bit and just adjust it a little bit up while setting the constraint to edge. And I select these faces from the left to the right, but my main concern will be the ones on the left because we're going to use symmetry on the other parts anyways. So I apply an extrusion here and let us apply the symmetry here. You see, it is completely, let us just tweak the threshold. And I believe we're getting somewhere. The softness is just because we haven't added the edge loops across the corners, and well, we're saving that part for the last couple of operations. And now let us go to this edit poly and then start by the Swift Loop tool and put the edges all across the corners of the mesh that we have. One here, and let us observe and try to find one here. We should add two more. This process, as we are familiar, is going to be mostly simple, but you know, for example, here we have to cut manually and connect the vertices by hand, and also observe the other parts of the mesh. I just removed an edge loop from there. I want to add another one there, another one in the bottom part, and another one on the other side. And I'm just continuing to cut manually or in the other parts just observe and add newer edge loops. Let's give it a turbo smooth. And I think it's good enough. Also, in here, I said we should always delete the unnecessary faces or edges that we have, and then start again, continuing adding the edge loops across the surfaces, and obviously cutting using the cut tool and cutting through the corners of the edge manually. And now here I want to create another circular shape to exactly this vertex. So I will just want to move it a little bit, but let me first create my engon. The two top and bottom vertices just match and it's good. And so I delete the middle edge loop and add a brand new one like this for it to be matching what we want, and then start to cut the vertex all across here and connect that in the places of our interest. And I think it's pretty good now. Select the faces and just like always get an inset for that, and to nullify the distance of the left, I believe I can cut the geometry to here and cut this one to there, and now I can remove them to get what we exactly want. We want to symmetrize to the other side, of course. So let us get back to adding swift loops to make sure we have sharpened everything. So let us observe what we get from here. I believe there's something going on there. So just like before, we know how to deal with this corner, or better say this situation. I add loops on both sides.